Oh, hello, and welcome back to another episode of What Are We Talking About, where we mostly talk about football, more specifically the NFL. My name's Jamie Jakes. I am your host, as you know, and today I'm very excited to go over my first best ball fantasy draft since Deandre Hopkins has been drafted. And spoiler alert, I reached for him. Can you sue me? I've done worse things for views. Am I right? All right. So I'm going to pull that up on the screen for y'all, and we're going to go over exactly how this draft went. I actually love how it went for me, and I'm going to break down a lot more than just my DeAndre Hopkins bit. I also drafted from the 12 spot, which is a pretty tough position to draft from just in general in fantasy football, but even more so this year, in my opinion. And my team ended up great, so let's see how I did it. Okay? So the first round, nothing too surprising to me. Bijan Robinson made it to 9, and I was kind of crossing my fingers to hope that he would fall all the way to 12 to me. That obviously didn't happen here, but I was very excited to get Garrett Wilson. Obviously, super freak stud. In my opinion, he has wide receiver 1 potential. Now that he has Aaron Rodgers throwing him the ball, and we have seen, obviously, Aaron Rodgers support number 1 overall wide receivers in the past. And I don't think there'll be any difference here, especially with the situation he's in over there with Nathaniel Hackett. On that turn at number 13 overall, I got the man whose jersey or t-shirt I'm wearing right now, Mr. Nicholas Chubb. I think he's the best running back in the NFL currently. Obviously, Christian McCaffrey has other skill sets that makes him more valuable for fantasy football, but I love Nicholas Chubb. And then we'll see a big, long, all 3 of the premier quarterbacks got taken, made it all the way back around. Mark Andrews was someone I was hoping to fall. He got sniped 3 spots before me. Wasn't super sad about Deebo Samuel going there. Jahmyr Gibbs was, again, going to be my next pick on this turn, but he got sniped. I did get sniped a few times in this draft. But I was okay with it because I got number 12 back-to-back, 13.5 points per game, Keenan Allen and DeAndre Hopkins. Of course, Keenan Allen was injured last year, and DeAndre Hopkins was suspended to start the season with a suspension for performance enhancers. His performance didn't seem too bad when he did get on the field, especially dealing with the quarterback situation that we had with Kyler Murray getting hurt just a few games after DeAndre Hopkins came off of that suspension. Honestly, I would probably have taken Jerry Jeudy over him there if this was a real draft. Mike Williams, maybe I would have thought about it, but I don't think I really reached too bad on DeAndre Hopkins. Like I said, he was top 12 at wide receiver in points per game last season, and I think he's going to stay healthy this year. I think having Tannehill throw him the football at Tennessee, he's clear number 1. The other big fantasy implication that's going to come out of this is, of course, Treylon Burks is not going to be drafted by me. He hasn't honestly been drafted by me. I was anticipating this happening, and I'm just not a big fan of that Tennessee wide receiver room, even though I do have some of their assets in Dynasty, and Kyle Phillips would love to see him, be okay this year, but I'm not holding my breath. He's probably on my list of people who I'm going to cut pretty early in the season with my 34-man Dynasty roster. We made it all the way back around. It's a long wait, especially when you're doing these 30-second drafts where you have 30 seconds to pick. Would have liked to see one of the big guys I am a huge fan of, who I was taking a quick little peek at ahead of DeAndre Hopkins, would be Christian Kirk. It's a story for another episode, but I really like Christian Kirk this year. I think he will be Jacksonville wide receiver 1 again this year, despite Calvin Ridley coming back off of his suspension. Story for another time. Wasn't too bummed out about anybody other than Ken Walker. Ken Walker and Alexander Madison were on my hit list for this next round, but he got picked. I wasn't too upset about it because Alexander Mattison, still going 60th overall in best ball, granted is 3 wide receiver, so I get the running backs are going to push down a little bit. This makes zero sense to me, okay? 2 years ago, the last 4 starts that Alexander Mattison had as a Vikings running back when Dalvin Cook was out with injury, he averaged 4.5 yards a carry. The big knock on him is he's not been as productive this year as he has in the past. He averaged 4.5 per carry about in those 4 games 2 years ago, and he averaged somewhere around 18 points per game in those 4 games that he started, okay? Sometimes running backs need a little bit more snaps to get in the rhythm, and sometimes when you're a backup running back, you're just honestly going to get put in a bad position and not going to produce. Your numbers aren't going to look quite as good, even though you are coming in fresh because you're coming in on 3rd and short situations or goal line situations where they're packed box and you're just not going to get the production that you would if you did stretch that out over the whole game. In my opinion, Alexander Mattison also, I think, will be a lot better in runs from 5 to 20 yards. I think he's going to hit a lot more 15-yard runs, but of course he's not going to have those knockout runs that we see from Dalvin Cook where he gets a little bit of a zone and he just takes it to the end zone from 75 yards out. We're not going to see that with Alexander Mattison, unfortunately, but we will see, I think, more consistent production with Alexander Mattison, where with Dalvin Cook in the past, you were kind of hoping for those 1 or 2 massive runs to really amplify his game for the week. I think he's a lot quicker in small areas and short field, where Dalvin Cook obviously excels in the open field when he can just run in a straight line really fast because that's what he's good at, right? Off that turn, I also did grab Tyler Lockett. Again, a big fan of his. You can see Treylon Burks still going 62. I mean, Jahan Dotson's going after him. Jordan Addison, Quentin Johnston still going after him. All of those guys I am taking way ahead of Treylon Burks. I don't think I've taken him a single time in any best ball draft this offseason. So now we're getting into the good stuff. So obviously I'm pretty stacked with wide receiver and running back. At this point I am picking at 84, and my man fell to me right there, Deshaun Watson, obviously coming off of a suspension with a mediocre season following that, except for his last 2 games where he performed extremely well. No one saw it, which is why we're going to take advantage and we're going to draft Deshaun Watson a lot this offseason, because you are also getting a bad person discount because he is a scumbag in real life, but scumbags score fantasy points just like the rest of them. So there you go. Off that turn, so this was funny, a little bit of a Wi-Fi issue. I was trying to upload another video while I was doing this draft on my Wi-Fi. My Wi-Fi crapped out. I was trying to take Elijah Moore here at 85. Instead, it auto-drafted Darren Waller. I'm not super excited about Darren Waller, but I'm not super bummed out about it, and it actually really worked out well for me because all the way around, David Njoku got taken at 98. Pat Freiermuth got taken at 103. So I actually really lucked out with that because I was expecting one of those 2 to fall to me over there at 108. Didn't happen, so I was actually pretty lucky that I timed out there. It worked out in my favor extremely well. And no one really got sniped for me. I wasn't really super excited about any of those other options other than David Njoku and Pat Freiermuth. I was still thinking about doubling up on a tight end and just being done with the position for the rest of the draft. Again, glad it didn't. I'll show you why a little bit later. But you know who did fall to me is Brian Robinson. Brian Robinson, of course, rookie last year, won the job in training camp, impressed the coaching staff so much over there at Washington. Now, I think the Washington Commanders are probably going to be terrible again this year, and that coaching staff is probably going to get the boot out the door, but this isn't Dynasty. This is best ball, and I'm going to go out on a limb here. Hit the hot take button on me if you want to, but I'm thinking in a season where a player doesn't get shot in the leg twice during training camp, he might be a little bit more explosive. He might be a little bit faster. He might be a little bit more comfortable with the offense, where he is just going to hit the ground running week 1, be that bell cow for Washington. They wanted him to be last year before he got shot twice in the leg, came back and still finished the season. Okay, I don't know why that's a crazy take, but apparently it is because we're still getting Brian Robinson at 108 in these best ball drafts, which is pretty mind blowing to me. Allen Lazard, he's more of a safe pick for me. He's obviously someone who doesn't have a super high ceiling, but I do think he is someone with a super high floor. Following Aaron Rodgers to the Jets, I think he's got a pretty darn good chance of being that wide receiver 2 there. And, with Aaron Rodgers, I'm expecting him to throw a lot of touchdowns again because he doesn't have a broken thumb this year. He's going to look a lot like he did with Nathaniel Hackett in Green Bay when he won the league MVP back-to-back, right? So that's why I'm really enjoying Allen Lazard, where I'm getting him right there. He is oftentimes like a safety pick for me. If I go heavy running back, quarterback, early on in the draft, I pop Allen Lazard on my roster. I feel great that he's going to produce every single week, and he will score a handful of touchdowns, which is great for best ball, obviously. We made it all the way back around, and towards the back of this draft, I feel like I was getting really lucky, where I was getting sniped a lot earlier on. It was really falling my way later on in the draft. I picked up Jaylen Warren at 132. If you haven't really educated yourself, which why would you? It's the Pittsburgh Steelers, on Jaylen Warren and how incredible he looked. There are Steelers fans out there that are like, let's get this Najee guy off the field. Let's get Jaylen Warren on the field a little bit more often because he is a super stud. There is a car beeping outside of my window here in Starks Ave in Dallas. It happens on occasion. We roll with whatever noises are going on outside. And I doubled up with another one of my I am obsessed with this guy, Kendre Miller, the New Orleans Saints. In the big show that we just posted on the channel, we talked a lot about Alvin Kamara and his potential suspension after he pled down to a misdemeanor. We got to keep in mind that Deshaun Watson, while in my opinion, a more serious case, he did a lot worse things, I think, compared to one instance, one blow-up with Alvin Kamara. I still think Alvin Kamara is not out of the woods yet in terms of a NFL suspension. He did plead no contest to a misdemeanor. Deshaun Watson, you got to remember, didn't get indicted. Those were all civil cases that he fought outside of the federal courts. Okay, so I think the NFL is still going to come down on Alvin Kamara. It's a violent crime that he did commit, and it is over. The case has been settled. People got paid, but I'm expecting a little bit more than a slap on the wrist still for Alvin Kamara. I would put that suspension around 6, 7. I would think I said it on the podcast at 7 over under is what I would expect for Alvin Kamara. Even if Alvin Kamara does get a slap on the wrist, even if he gets a 2-game suspension to start the season, which I think would be extremely light for what he actually did, Kendre Miller, who played football down the road from me here in Dallas over at TCU, was unbelievable. He's really flying under the radar this year because this has been a super stacked running back class. It'll go down in history as one of the best running back classes that we've seen in probably a decade or two. It is super packed with very explosive, very fast, very talented individuals, and he has all the makings of a professional NFL running back. He's got the size, he's got the speed. He just kind of got outshined by the likes of, Jahmyr Gibbs and Bijan Robinson, where he's really not getting the hype that he really deserves. I'm not a big fan of Jamal Williams, coming from Detroit. I think he's annoying personally. Don't tell anybody that. And I don't think he's that great of a football player. If you put me behind that line in Detroit and handed me off the ball 70 times in the red zone or whatever he got last season, I think I would have scored. I don't think I would have broke Barry Sanders' record, but I think I would have come close. Okay? I think Kendre Miller is just going to outshine. His talent alone is going to outshine all of the other running backs in that backfield. And Alvin Kamara, even if he is coming back, I think is on the downswing of his career. I don't think they're using him very well for his personal skill set over there at New Orleans. And for that reason, I think Kendre Miller is just a guy who's just going to potentially take over, even if there isn't an injury in that running back room. Coming all the way back around, so like I said, I got really lucky with the way the tight ends fell to me. One of my favorite draft picks this season at 156, Taysom Hill. is just a no-brainer in best ball. Obviously, I'm not a big fan of him. Maybe not so obviously. I'm not a big fan of him in redraft leagues where you actually do have to start him, because he will have 6 games this year where he gets 0 points or less than 3 points, just the way they use him. But then again, he will have games where he's tight end 1. He'll be top 3 tight end in 5-6 games this week. And that's really all I need from him there, right? He's at 156. I just need those big boom games. I only have to start 1 tight end a week, so Darren Waller, Taysom Hill, I would expect one of them to have a big week any given Sunday, right? So that's why I'm loving that there. And then I had to take Jordan Love. Talked about it on the big show. I think Jordan Love is going to be great this year. I think he has to be great this year. I don't think there's really any reason to doubt him. Historically, when an NFL franchise sticks with a guy like Jordan Love and sends on the Alex Smith to the next team, or sticks with their guy like Geno Smith did last year in Seattle, historically, it tends to work out pretty well. I think Jordan Love is going to be a super solid fantasy asset going forward. I don't think there's really any reason that he will fail with what they have on that offense in Green Bay. I don't think there's really anything to be worried about. And after that, there was a big kind of decline in the quarterback room, and I did need a backup quarterback for Deshaun Watson, who I did take a lot earlier. Now we're getting into the fun stuff. 180. Puka Nacua. I call him Puka Nacua because why wouldn't you? This guy was a guy that really was under my radar when it was time for me to do my Dynasty rookie drafts. If I would have done a little bit better research, if he came out a little bit more hyped up, I would have definitely taken this guy. This guy is, if you turn on the film, is a super stud. He's just, the talent just jumps off the film for Mr. Puka over there. And he's going to the Rams. I'm also pretty excited about the Rams. I'm taking Cooper Kupp wherever I can get him, basically, except at 1.1 where I'm taking Justin Jefferson. I'm taking Cooper Kupp 1.2 if he's there, God willing, because I love me some Cooper Kupp. He does have some injury concerns, Cooper Kupp. Even if he doesn't have injury concerns at 180, I think a guy like Puka Nacua can really slide his way into a starting role in the back half of the season and really have some great production over there with LA. I'd also grab Dawson Knox, because why wouldn't you? Great athlete, tight end. He will be competing for snaps and for targets with Dalton Kincaid, who they drafted very early on in the draft. First tight end to be off the board, goes to Buffalo. What do we know about rookie tight ends, though? It takes a while to get accustomed to the league. He is a very special talent, obviously, but I don't think there's any reason Dawson Knox can't edge his way in and have a very productive season. Again, really not getting sniped here at all. Had a nice long wait, didn't really affect me much. And I took my other guy who I always take late in these drafts, Michael Wilson. Again, just a guy who jumps off the film. I did grab him in my Dynasty draft as a free agent after the 4th round. I felt pretty lucky about that. And Arizona, obviously, the quarterback situation there is a little bit up in the air. If I was Kyler Murray and I'm seeing my team trade off or just cut superstar perennial Pro Bowlers, I wouldn't be super excited to come back and play football this season. He will, of course, because he's a professional football player. But his ACL recovery, I think they're really going to take it slow and be careful with him by how fast they take him back. They do have Clayton Tune, who I am a big fan of. He had the #1 Pro Football Focus passer rating in that draft class. Funny enough that PFF knows how bad their grading system is, so they didn't rank him near the top of the quarterback rankings in their draft. But he's got all that. He's a big dude. He's got a great arm. He's very accurate. Him and Tank Dell over there in Houston just absolutely dominated when they were on the field together. And I don't think there's any reason that Michael Wilson can't slide in and be the #1 wide receiver there very quickly and build a relationship with whichever quarterback is throwing him the ball over there in Arizona, even Colt McCoy. And my final pick, since I did take Michael Wilson, that's like my 18th round pick. Obviously, I picked him 17th round. So I'm taking Luke Musgrave. I know, rookie tight end, taking a big risk. But after looking at all the other guys that went after him, I'm not super excited about any of those guys. So for that reason, again, tight end is one of those positions, especially if you don't have Travis Kelce, George Kittle, or Mark Andrews. And even if you do, sometimes it can be a really up and down position. So I really like stacking my best ball teams full of tight ends, especially late, because all you need is a touchdown from one of them. And like I said, I'm a fan of Jordan Love. I technically got that stack. If you're into that sort of thing, which I'm not, I don't really believe in stacking that much. I think it's more of a tiebreaker than something to reach on guys for. But that's a conversation for a different day. Luke Musgrave, he'll be the starting tight end in Green Bay. He's going to fall into the end zone a handful of times, and that's why I took him there. Hop up here, Mr. Dog. This is my dog, Mr. Boston. He's just coming to visit us right now. And I would like to end today's chat talking about why it is important to be doing these best ball drafts, especially if you're a sports gambler and you're spending money trying to beat the sports books. I think, in my opinion, if you do follow someone's channel like myself, where you just approach these things logically and make good decisions, it's really, really going to pay off for you. Because when you're gambling against the sports book, they have a similar rake, they have an 11% rake on underdog, where that's just how they make their money, right? They got credit card fees and stuff to deal with as well, and they're running a pretty successful, massive business as far as I can tell. And they're going to take their rake, the sports book is going to take their rake on an even bet. The difference is, in the sports book, you have to bet against highly efficient lines that have just gotten almost impossible to beat in the past 3 or 4 years with new analytics and I'm sure AI that they're using to set these lines, where after week 3 or 4, when they have all their data, it's going to be really tough to beat. You are playing against some real dummies when you are drafting in underdog fantasy. So really what you're hoping for is 2 to 4 guys in your draft to just make a mess of it. Okay, and it pretty consistently happens where there'll be 2 very below average teams and 2 other teams that just make just absolute bonehead decisions throughout the draft. That means all you have to do is be an average fantasy football player. And we all know, if we're watching me on this channel with 2 subscribers, you're probably a little bit more dedicated to this, to following this than your average person. So going through this draft, a couple pretty smart decisions here. I think the first one I'll stop on is Mr. Deliverance. I can't read. Mr. Deliverance here. He drafted Travis Kelce at 6, which is fine. He got the Travis Kelce, Patrick Mahomes stack at 19, which I think is fine. And then he takes Calvin Ridley. You know my opinions on Mr. Calvin Ridley. I think I think you're really buying in on best case scenario Calvin Ridley. You're buying him at his ceiling, which is someone who is going to take 6 weeks to get accustomed to the speed of the NFL and start to produce after that. Of course, during the playoff run in your fantasy leagues, that's beneficial too. But so Calvin Ridley, I'm not a big fan of there. And then he takes Trevor Lawrence. Okay, so he went tight end, quarterback, wide receiver, quarterback. Okay, so he's going 0 RB, which I'm not a big fan of this, especially this year. He doesn't get a running back until Dameon Pierce. So his number 1 running back is Dameon Pierce of Houston. He's not going to score a lot of touchdowns because he plays for Houston, right? He's not going to be very productive, even if he does get that bell cow row there, which, who knows. James Cook, it's fine if James Cook is your 3rd or 4th running back, but you don't really want to start that guy every single week, which is kind of what your mindset has to be when you're going through these drafts. There's really not a lot of upside for James Cook, in my opinion, because number 1, I think we all know who the leading rusher on that team is, and he's not a running back. He plays quarterback, and Josh Allen. And they're just a pass-heavy team. Josh Allen's going to score a lot of red zone touchdowns running the ball in. And in best ball fantasy, those touchdowns are so valuable. So for that reason, I'm not a big fan of James Cook in general, especially as my number 2 running back. Evan Ingram, so his number 3 running back is all the way down. He even made some decent picks. Chuba Hubbard, Latavius Murray, who I don't even think will make the roster over there in Buffalo. He had to use a 187 draft pick on because he was just so light in that position. So there's one guy who just made an absolute, just dummied up that whole draft for himself. Not a great draft at all. Who else dummied up this draft? So Mr. Meyer time. Honestly, had a fine start to the draft. CeeDee Lamb, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jahmyr Gibbs, Travis Etienne. I'm a little bit iffy on Michael Pittman, who's going to be having a guy throw him the football who hasn't thrown a lot of footballs in college, hasn't thrown any footballs in the NFL. We all know how rookie quarterbacks aren't really necessarily going to support top 12 talents at wide receiver. And when you draft a Michael Pittman at 59, you're kind of hoping that his ceiling is wide receiver 1 range, top 12 wide receiver. Treylon Burks, okay, I don't know if you didn't heard the news or whatever, but he's taken Treylon Burks there at 62. Dalvin Cook, the rest of his draft is okay. But again, someone who I would consider would be kind of on the bottom half of this draft, just the way that it fell. Number 1 overall, I think he had a great draft. That'll happen whenever you are dealing with this format. I rose 11. Strategy-wise, I think was fine. He goes wide receiver, wide receiver, wide receiver, which really shoehorns you into forcing yourself into taking running back pretty quick. He takes Najee. Not a big fan of Najee. Like I said, I like his backup a little bit more as a talent, and I don't want Najee Harris as my number 1 running back, no matter what. Just with that offense alone, we got the same offensive coordinator, we got the same quarterback. And I don't think they're gonna be scoring many touchdowns again this season, if I had to guess. Okay. Zach Charbonnet, Tank Bigsby, Tyler Algier. I like Tyler Algier, but I think that's a really below average draft for Mr. or Mrs. I Rose. I don't mean to assume anything about anybody. So for that reason, I think drafting underdog is a lot more bang for your buck in terms of the expected return. If you're looking to make money off it, which if you're betting money, why wouldn't you? I think it's a great idea to draft there. And it's fun. It really has made my off-season getting to, we're pretty close to the Hall of Fame game here in a couple of weeks, where we're going to be watching players wearing NFL uniforms play a game of football. And I'm very excited about it. But drafting on underdog has really helped me bridge that gap. And you can draft for as low as $3 a draft. You can do as many drafts as you want, because once you draft, you're done for the season. The best team wins in the end, no matter what, because the computer automatically starts your highest scoring players. If you use my username as a promo code, JAMJKSHB, you will get a bonus double match up to $100 for your first deposit. I would recommend putting in all $100 because, let's be honest, you're going to be doing a lot of drafts on this platform. So get the most bang for your buck. I chickened out and started with 50, and honestly, the biggest regret of my whole entire life at this point. If you like this, please subscribe to the channel. It's a very, very new channel, obviously, which in my opinion, if you're wanting to win fantasy football, you don't want to follow the big guys. You want to follow the little guys because everyone's watching the big guys, right? So you want to get edges where you can, and I think supporting a small channel like mine is a great way to do it. Thank you for watching. This has been What Are We Talking About? A YouTube channel where we talk about NFL. I have been Jamie Jakes. You can follow me on Twitter at JAMJKS, and you can find me on Instagram at DRJamieJakes. Thank you, and good night.